What do they do all day, these people in the capital, besides decorating their bodies and waiting around for a new shipment of tributes to roll in and die for their entertainment? Hey everyone, welcome back to a novel review, the book podcast series where I review a different book every week. If you are a lover of literature joining me for the first time, you are definitely in the right place because every week I review a different book. This week being no different as I am talking about The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Every month I try to do a fantasy book, normally as part of a series, and it's October. Taking us through to the end of the year will be the Hunger Games series, so October, November, December, the 3 books that make up the Hunger Games trilogy I will be exploring. And this is a series that I've wanted to do for quite a long time. Probably not as much fantasy sci-fi as I traditionally do, a bit more dystopian, but still a large amount of fun to be had here. So I'll be speaking about that in a book. First though, I just want to say I hope we're all well. I hope everyone has some great books on their to be read pile. I just want to say thanks so much for you guys for listening. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, I hope everyone is well out there, and wherever you are, I hope you got some great books on your pile. So cheers guys. Before we get into the book though, I have done some book shopping recently. It wouldn't be a book podcast if I hadn't done some book shopping. It seems to be all I ever do is some book shopping, which is absolutely delightful. I bought 2 books recently. Ursula K. Le Guin's The Word for World is Forest. I'll hold it up for the benefit of those on YouTube. Looks like a really interesting book, but I think what drew me in to purchase this is, one, it's incredibly short. It's 110 pages and it's written by Ursula K. Le Guin. She has very quickly risen to be an incredibly important author in my life, and is a phenomenal writer because I've just done her series, the Earthsea series, for my previous fantasy series that I did. So go check those books out, those episodes out. I love the idea of being sort of like a one-done fantasy sci-fi novel, just sort of like you're dipping your toe in and then you're immediately done with one book. Sometimes the idea of, tackling a 10-book series at 1,000 pages per book can be a bit daunting. So getting smaller works of sci-fi and fantasy is always quite refreshing and really nice. So I'm saving that for, I guess, a Sunday when I've got a bit of spare time and can sort of smash it in one. So really, really looking forward to that. The other book is the start of a series, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. A lot of people speak very, very highly of this series, and I saw the book and thought, you know what, the first book isn't too long, 384 pages. It's short enough that you can read the first one and then decide from there, I guess. I've never read any Robin Hobb, but I think enough people speak incredibly highly of her as a writer and this as a series that it does make me quite interested and excited to get to this, hopefully soon. I don't know. But hopefully both of these will be read soon. And that was just a bit of book shopping. So Ursula K. Le Guin, The Word for World is Forest, and Robin Hobb, Assassin's Apprentice. Okay, let's get into the book itself. The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Holding it up for the benefit of those on YouTube. You will notice on YouTube there is this wonderful little rubbish sticker that you cannot take off, which is, I think, just a general crime against books in general. But I think what I love about this one is it says The Hunger Games, now a major motion picture, March 23, 2012, facebook.com/The Hunger Games UK. And doesn't that feel just so incredibly dated that you would advertise something like a huge film like this via a Facebook page? And not only that, commit the crime of adding a non-removable sticker on a reprint of the books directing you to that Facebook page. I wonder if that Facebook page is still up. But just what a crime in the first place to put a non-removable sticker on a book, but then directing you to a Facebook page. I mean, doesn't that just feel so incredibly dated? It feels like decades ago we were doing that. I guess it was 2012, so it is, more or less decades, or at least a decade and a bit ago. But I don't know, that kind of just gave me a bit of a giggle when I picked these books up secondhand. Wonderful story, The Hunger Games. I think I'll do a brief overview for the benefit of everyone. This is a dystopian world. It's taking place in a future state of North America. North America itself has fallen and it is now recognized as the state of Panem. There is a capital controlling the country, and in the capital everyone lives like kings. Everyone lives an incredibly decadent life, and I think interestingly has a lot of mythological, or not mythological, ancient historical names, mostly Roman names. which, I think is some nice similarities there between the decadence of the Roman Empire and what's going on here. But then there are 12 districts that live outside the capital, and each district, depending where they are, contributes something to this society, despite the fact that they are treated more or less like rubbish and live in abject poverty, especially the further out you go. That is the setting for the story. We are mostly following Katniss Everdeen, and she is a 16-year-old girl living in District 12, so the furthest district away, the poorest district of the 12, and she is pretty much just trying to struggle through life and stay alive. Now, the shocking thing about this world is that every year there are the Hunger Games, and that is where 2 children, so between the ages of 12 and 18, are selected from each district, so 24 kids in total, taken to an arena and left to fight it out in a battle of the fittest, war of attrition, 24 kids enter, 1 kid leaves situation, and everyone watches it as sport. And it's obviously a huge thing for the Capital Watch because they really enjoy the spectacle of it, the decadence of it, the I don't know what they enjoy about it really, but it's because it's just children killing themselves. But they enjoy something about it, which is nice for them. And lo and behold, Katniss Everdeen gets selected for this particular year, where she then has to go in and fight it out with these 22 other kids, as well as another kid from her district as well. And that's kind of where a lot of the tension comes from in these stories, is because you see within the games themselves a lot of relationships form, but of course, as you're reading, there can only be one winner. The book itself, I think, is actually really, really lovely. It's written with this incredible pace to it. It is obviously not a high-class piece of literature because it is youth fiction. It's angled towards young adults, and obviously for that reason, it's not a high-class piece of literature. You're not expecting that, which is absolutely fine. But I think the pacing of it is just constant and frantic and makes it really, really readable, makes it a great page turner. It's nearly 450 pages. And honestly, I couldn't put it down. It's just so enjoyable to read. I think the world building and the characters are a shining light in the story. The world building it's just got wonderful detail to it. You can really imagine it. It kind of feels very similar to the world we live in now. And the characters within it feel like characters within our world. And obviously that's the idea of it. It is dystopian, so it is meant to be, a state of our world, our lives in the future. And because of that, the world building, I think, does become incredibly important because you can so easily pick it apart. But I think the ideas behind it, the world building behind it, and the characters are just written and fleshed out in a really wonderful way. And yeah, the characters throughout the course of the story as well, I think they are really well fleshed out, but they also develop really nicely through the course of the story, which makes it this just incredible novel. And I think I was really, really surprised at how much I actually enjoyed reading these books. And I don't know why I was surprised, because I was kind of surprised that I liked the movies. And then I was like, well, I want to read the books. And then I was surprised I liked the books. And I guess it just keeps surprising me, even though I shouldn't be surprised anymore. But maybe that's just my own failings as a reader and a viewer and a person taking in the art, is that I keep doubting that it's ever going to be good for no reason, and that it keeps being good, which is obviously a bad thing in some respects, but also makes it more enjoyable for me as well. So that was really, really cool. So the selection for the Hunger Games, I found a really fascinating point in the story, and it works like this, is that if you're 12 years old, your name gets put in once into the lottery. If you're 13, it gets put in twice, 14, 3 times, and so on and so forth until the age of 18. And that can be it. That can more or less be it. And just, I'm going to pause there for a second, because if that is a part of the story that you like, this lottery aspect of the story, go check out The Lottery by Shelley Jackson. That is a really, really cool story, really frightening story, but with a similar kind of vein. It's very, very short story. I think it's like 15, 20 pages. Just go check that out. Don't read any kind of spoilers. Don't read anything about it. Just go read it and be utterly amazed and wowed and horrified at the beauty and skill of Shelley Jackson to create a story like that. But then, so your name gets entered in, and it's frightening the older you get because your name's in the lottery more. But then there's this other thing called the tessera, where if you want, and obviously these are dealing with, incredibly poor people, incredibly poor families and children, where, the children are working from quite a young age to try to support the families because they are living in abject poverty. There's this thing called the tessera, where you can enter your name into the ballot more and more, and as a result be gifted it's a year's worth of grain and oil and things like that. And so, you agree that, yep, my name's going to go in this handful more times to the lottery itself, therefore risking my life more just to get some grain for my family. And it's this, I found it really fascinating because it's this absolute brutal and horrifying aspect to society that they just have to live through on one hand, and that the capital permits on the other hand. And what the capital's really saying is, we can pay you quite easily. We can give you more food quite easily. This isn't a food shortage that's going on. We just want you to risk your life more. We want you to self-sacrifice. We want you to dehumanize yourself further and risk your lives further for our enjoyment in the Hunger Games by just trying to put food on the table. And it's kind of like that level of dehumanization that goes on in this initial stage of just the lottery itself, but then the Tessera as well, I found is just really, really frightening, but really, really, I guess, setting the tone for what the story is and the sort of the power dynamics between the capital and the other districts, because there is a complete admission, and it's in the open, that the capital could easily give you more food and give you a supply of food that could sustain you, but they don't want to unless you sacrifice something for them. And that sacrifice is putting your name in the Tessera and potentially getting drawn more and more. Now, what follows from that is not Katniss Everdeen actually getting selected for the games, but her younger sister, Prue, getting selected. And then, of course, we have the incredibly famous, and I'm sure everyone knows this, I Volunteer as tribute, where Katniss Everdeen volunteers herself to partake in the games, which is incredibly rare because your chances of winning this are, 24-1 to be very, very specific. And so, your odds of winning this are incredibly, incredibly low. And even if you do win, you're going to be so psychologically damaged, because to win, you've actually got to participate in the murder of other kids. But Katniss, she volunteers as tribute nonetheless, just to save her sister, not her daughter. And that, of course, just plays into the gross pageantry of this entire situation, because the capital watching on loves this, and they love the story behind it. People volunteering as tribute, even though on one hand we're getting one side where it's Katniss Everdeen living through these very real emotions and very real reality of entering these games and potentially dying, we get the alternate side, the flip side of the gross pageantry of the capital being absolutely amazed and wowed and enjoyed and enthralled by this spectacle that they get to see for the Hunger Games, which, I think, again, just sort of highlights the power dynamics between them, because these very real human lives are just sources of entertainment. The reality TV going on over here is just, or the real human lives over here is just reality TV for these completely socially removed individuals in the capital, which is just all kinds of frightening, but fascinating as well to watch that dynamic shift and play out on the page. And I think one of the things I found most startling about this book is something I was trying not to do as I was reading the book, is compare it to the film. But obviously I saw the films first, so that was my first relationship with the story itself, and naturally I was going to compare them as a result of that, as you would do exactly the same the other way. I will say the book is much better, which we all expected anyway. But I will say one area I think the book really kind of excels is highlighting and reasserting and reaffirming that these are really children taking part in these games. I think the films, they obviously probably wanted to cast actors that had a bit of pull and were going to get people into the cinemas more, bums on seats kind of situation. And Jennifer Lawrence was, a very famous actor then, as she is still now. But she did feel, a bit older than 16. She must have been in her 20s maybe at that stage of her life, or at least very near there. And it really didn't feel like she was a 16-year-old young girl that was just incredibly young. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is that they feel incredibly young in this book. It really hits home that these are children, and that kind of adds to the grossness of this entire pageantry of the games, is that they're parading around kids and they're fully accepting that they're going to watch kids murder themselves. And even if you manage to win the games by some stroke of luck, is it even luck? Because one of the characters in this book is Hamish Abernathy, and he's the only other, or I think he's one of the only people to win the games from District 12, and must be in his 40s now, maybe 50s, and he is just a raging alcoholic that really can't survive in the world anymore. He is just completely suffering. And again, The films, they've obviously got to have sort of a presentable person on page with Woody Harrelson, and I think he plays it quite well. But in the book, Haymitch is drunk all the time. He is vomiting on people all the time. Like, he is a disgusting person, and you kind of dislike him for that in the book, but you're also kind of very much aware that he is clearly suffering some intense forms of PTSD. Now, a lot of the story actually takes place within the games. Again, another area I think this book excels over the films is the games are a lot longer in the book. It actually feels like this proper war of attrition where they're spending multiple, I think it's even, 2 weeks they spend within the games themselves. It's not all action-packed. There's obviously a complete duality of one being hunted and hunting, but also just trying to survive in the natural or in this natural environment that they find themselves in. But as that was sort of developing, I found it really interesting, this commentary of the other kids within the games themselves. And naturally, you're following Katniss Everdeen, so you're really rooting for her to win the games. You're rooting for her because she's the story you're following. But as you sort of read it more and more, and the relationships develop more and more, and the characters evolve within the games, you kind of realize as the reader that you're just rooting for her because you're following her, and because you know she's a good person, because you've got her backstory. And what you're really rooting for is the death of other children. And it's kind of like this moment of realization I had where, I'm rooting for the death of these other kids so Katniss can win. And I'm viewing that I hate these other kids because they're, trying to kill Katniss. But they're trying to kill Katniss because Katniss is trying to kill them. And it's kind of like this gross realization that that's kind of what it feels like. That's what, people in positions of power do. They make us fight within ourselves, amongst ourselves, to create this drama when really they're the ones we should be hating. And the whole time you're hating this person over there for trying to kill Katniss when really we should be hating the Capitol. And obviously we do hate the Capitol because they're an absolutely abusive source of power that takes enjoyment from murdering children. But it's just kind of like that duality of hating someone because they hate you, but they hate you because you're trying to kill them, and that intense paradox of just going back and forth between the situation of it all, and realizing that the only reason we're really rooting for Katniss to win is because she's the story we're following, and in everyone else's story she is a bad person as well. And it's kind of just like that balance between the stories that I found really, really fascinating. I mean, I really enjoyed the book. I think one of the best things about this book is you can read this book and just stop there and end with the ending you get at this book. If you do want to continue, you can continue, but it can be read as this kind of like one done novel. If you do want to stop there, feel absolutely free to, because it does have a natural end of the story. You don't have to progress if you don't want to. I absolutely want to, and that's the book I'm reading now. I have started reading the second book, Catching Fire. This one is shaping up. I don't know. I have a feeling this is going to be my favorite in the series, because this is just where there's going to be huge twists and turns, and I can't wait for that. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The Hunger Games. What would I rate this book out of 5? Honestly, this was a lot of fun, a real page turner. I absolutely enjoyed it. I wasn't in a reading slump, but it's the kind of book that could pull you out of a reading slump. I'm going to rate this a 4.3 out of 5. Well, thank you guys for making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode, The Hunger Games. In a month's time, I will be doing the second book, Catching Fire, by Suzanne Collins as well, the second novel in the Hunger Games series. So make sure you come back for that. But as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you next week. Cheers, guys.